Good evening. This is Leslie Davis, your host for the Earth Protector Show. Glad you're with us again. We're fortunate to have with us tonight Leo Cashman, an expert in health and health advocacy and things, and we'll get into that in more detail, and Nancy Hone, a registered nurse who's been involved in politics and all these political shenanigans going on about the environment. You know, rather than jump into the area how it started and did it start, I want to get right into the things that we're working on now. We'll talk about fear, masks, the lockdown, and the testing. So I'd like to talk about the masks first. People wearing all these masks, is it doing any good? Is it helping to prevent disease?
Well, certainly when we cough, particles go out from us. And, but there's a lot of controversy. They'll say the CDC says, well, it protects you if I have a mask, but it doesn't protect, let's see, how does it go down? But I'm not protected from you. Well, right. That's stupid. If a mask goes one way protection, it goes the other way protection. But in Sweden, in surgery, they don't even use masks. So
they don't at all?
They don't use masks in surgery in Sweden. So there's a broad range of question of whether it's helping or not. I always say about this fear is I wouldn't go down on Hennepin Avenue at 3 in the morning without 3 large men with guns and billy clubs. I wouldn't do it because I'm cautious and it's dangerous. I went to a tap dancing show 2 years in a row on the Coles, Coles Theater down there.
Cowles
Theater, I'm sorry. And I came there and there were 6 police cars with their bubbles going and, you know, armed officers in flak jackets and helmets. And I said, officer, is there a problem? And he said, we're just here to protect you. I went, wow. And so then when we came out, it was the same thing. So I no longer want to go down there. But my point is, if you're afraid, protect yourself. Stay home if you're sick.
Right.
If you feel vulnerable, stay home. But I don't think people should have to wear masks. They steam up my glasses. I can't even drive with them. So I don't know whether they help or not, but I don't think they're doing much. They're making people feel better.
What do you think about that, Leo? It's people scared, you know?
Well, yeah, I agree with what I'm hearing Nancy say, and it's not a big point to me that you should not wear masks, and you know, but really people who are not well, who are coughing and so on, they should probably stay home, and they should probably be careful of spreading whatever they have to other people. So I think we have to use some common sense there. And, you know, in certain circumstances, masks may be appropriate. And however, one of the things that I hear even from health professionals is they can interfere with your breathing capacity. You know, if your airflow is constricted, it can have a detrimental effect on your overall health and your immune system. So we have to try to use masks in the appropriate medical situations, but I think that they can be overdone and can be somewhat detrimental when they're overused and when they're used and it's not really necessary.
I think the bigger issue is hand washing. I think one of the biggest things I'm hoping will come out of this is people wash their hands. As a nurse, when I come home from the grocery store, always wash my hands. I've touched that cart and that little basket where the baby sits. People put their purse there and their vegetables, and I'm thinking, what was last there? A poopy diaper. So I'm hoping out of this that people will wash their hands more. Number 2, that they don't go to school or go to work when they're sick. This has become a part of our culture not to stay home when you're sick.
Well, that's just a common sense thing that's been around.
But they don't anymore. When we were young, we stayed home from school if we were sick, right?
And now they don't because the parents are working.
And they can get an antibiotic.
But you know, on the mask thing, they have these cutesy little get-togethers and they're cutting up and having little parties about it, but the inks or the dye or the material
can be toxic.
Well, because they get moist with your breathing and all, so they've got that. And then when you wash it, most people using detergents, and put it in with their laundry and the fabric softeners, and then they're breathing all those
They can be
materials
toxic
in.
from that.
So that's not really helpful, and they're not telling people about it.
I forgot about that because all this fabric has sizings in it. And I can't go into Target or where they have clothes or fabric or anything. It makes me cough because there's so much sizings and that sort of thing in the fabrics.
Yeah, so
And
it's
you're
not like
breathing.
they're wearing some sterile,
Right.
medically, surgically approved item. That it's,
Right.
Okay, so the people are doing that, I think are doing it, and we'll get into the conspiracy idea a little later on, to scare the people, you know, stay away from that person, wear a mask, and creating all this fear that's going on. And the fear, a lot of it has to do because they said they're testing for the people. And I've never understood the testing right from the beginning, what they're showing.
I can talk about the PCR test and
The one is where they're swabbing their noses.
swabbing the noses.
But do they swab the nose now for the new one they're talking about, the antibodies?
No, that's, I
It's a
believe
blood
that's a
test.
blood test.
It's a blood test.
But the PCR, that is a valid technology. It was invented in the early 1980s, and it's really well respected as a manufacturing technology because, for example, they can use it to make synthetic insulin. They can start with a small amount of something and duplicate it and amplify the amount you have. And after 36, 38, 40 cycles
Multipliers.
of doubling the amount of something that you have,
36 times?
in that realm of 36, 37,
That's
39
like
times,
trillions.
you get amplification beyond a billion after enough cycles, and the number of cycles of amplification vary from one place to another, one country to another, so it's not perfectly standardized, and the more cycles you go through, the more likely you are to have a positive result and say, okay, now I can see what we're looking for.
A positive result.
Positive result meaning that you are only amplifying the particular genomic sequence that you're looking for. So you try to amplify it, you can't see it immediately because it's so little of it. You keep amplifying it. After enough cycles, it's well over 1 billion times amplified, and then they look for evidence of a certain genetic sequence, and if it's there, they say positive. If it's not there, they say it's negative.
Who
But
made up that genetic sequence? Where did they get that from?
that supposedly was provided by the Chinese health officials, and I have to wonder whether there was sufficient scrutiny about, was that really an actual virus that really was causing this disease? But supposedly the test itself was given to our CDC and the WHO from the Chinese health officials.
CDC, meaning Centers for Disease Control,
in the
and
United
WHO
States.
is the World Health Organization.
And I
So-
saw in the news 2 days ago, it said that those tests are only 25% of the people do not, even that have had COVID, are tested for COVID, do not show that they have antibodies. 25%.
Okay, but let's not jump into the antibodies, because just make
Well,
sure.
that's the test you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about the PCR, which is the polymerase chain reaction test, and again, it's has a great usefulness in manufacturing, like manufacturing of insulin, but it's only a qualitative test in that it doesn't tell you how much of that RNA you have, so it doesn't really
RNA,
give
what is that?
ribonucleic acid, which is
That's what they're looking for in the PCR
that's
test
right.
for the RNA?
the RNA, and there's a genetic sequence that's not the whole thing, but a certain genetic sequence that's characteristic of this virus, supposedly, that they're looking for, and so is it really, they don't identify the actual virus when they do a PCR test. So you don't see an entire virus, so you're doing many, many thousands of tests and not really seeing a virus. You're seeing something that the test says indicates the presence of the virus, doesn't tell you how much, doesn't tell you if it was a month ago that you got a little smidgen of it, or if you have a heavy viral load from it. It's not quantitative, it's just qualitative. So, and this is part of this is important to realize, because if they have any inkling, any amount of it that they say gives you a positive test, and then you die, they'll say, oh, that was a COVID death. But as we will be talking about, you might have overwhelming health problems. You might have heart disease or diabetes or cancer, and you're dying. But if they see any remnant, any tiny, tiny amount, it might be a negligible amount almost, they'll say, oh, you had a positive test. That if that patient dies, you darn well better classify it as a COVID death.
They were kind of ordered to
they
do
order,
that.
That's
CDC
right.
ordered
So we're
doctors to do
we're
that.
getting into the realm of how accurate are the death statistics, and I think it's very clear that they're not accurate, and the instructions coming from the CDC are designed to give us as large of a death statistic or death count as possible. And again, the agenda, you have to think, is they want a lot of fear, they want a lot of panic.
Why would they want that? Why would the Centers for Disease Control want to create fear and panic in the public?
I think really, you know, and there are a lot of other pieces of evidence that point to a plan to have this pandemic occur as it's unfolding, and they are planning to, I think the ultimate plan is to force everybody in America and perhaps worldwide as much as possible to be vaccinated with a vaccine that's going to be developed by the Gates Foundation working jointly with NIH, which is
National
Fauci,
Institute of Health.
National Institute of Health, and
is that Fauci? That guy
Fauci is the leader of NIH on this issue, and so he's not the director of NIH. That's Francis Collins, and he's very involved in this too. But Fauci is in charge of pandemic preparedness, and he's at the infectious disease part of NIH.
He's a known liar. I mean, there is evidence of him, various tapes and videos of him lying all the way back to the HIV/AIDS issues in the 80s.
And
Yeah.
why did Bill Gates come on a public forum 5 years ago, he's a computer guy, and predict this pandemic and state he would be the savior? And Fauci did the same thing 3 or 4 years ago. So
Well,
who are these people?
Fauci's money comes from, large part from Gates.
Correct.
I mean, Gates funds
Correct.
the World Health Organization.
Yeah, my notes. I have a few notes on this, and let me cover it from my notes here, because I think they're very precise, and I think they get to what we're all talking about here. And in October 18th of 2019, there was an event in New York called Event 201, and it was a pandemic tabletop, really kind of like a rehearsal for what I think they knew was coming with this pandemic.
Well, hold on one second. I don't mean to interrupt, but we hear a lot about they, you know, and nobody really identifies.
I'm about to do that.
You're going to do that.
I'm just about to do that. You got me.
Great.
This was sponsored by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the World Economic Forum, and the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. And there just happened to be a head doctor from the Chinese version of the CDC. So their public health agency was represented, a former CIA deputy director there, a gentleman from, maybe it's a woman, vice president at Johnson & Johnson, which is one of the vaccine companies that's working on developing a vaccine. So they were very interconnected in looking ahead to a pandemic and it was almost like a dress rehearsal for what was about to play out.
So this was
October
in October of
2019.
2019.
Last October.
October
Yeah.
20, 6 months ago.
It was not that many months ago, but it was supposedly before all this unfolded. So the question is, how did they know? How are they so organized and prepared and discussing something that
No one else
played
knew.
out? You know, I mean, how did they know that that nasty virus was going to jump out from the bat to the human being in December or January? Because this was done in October.
And what they say, those individuals would say, and Fauci and all these people would say is, well, we've been predicting a pandemic for many years. Well, look at what they've tried to do. The swine flu. Oh, it's a pandemic. H1N1. Oh my God, it's a pandemic.
Yeah.
The H1N1 was a bad flu. I got it. I thought I was going to die. My 97-year-old father got it. I thought we were both going to die. It was bad. We didn't die, obviously. I'm here today. And but they've been trying to put this panic in us for many years.
Well, they did it now.
And they did it now. So, but look at the societal landscape. A lot of people have no faith, and there's not a moral base for them to move. The young people, they are brainwashed in our society, okay?
From their education.
From their education, they're brainwashed. So you have this landscape of predicting, oh, it's a so we're all set up to say it's a pandemic. Oh my God, we're all going to die. Comes out and fear starts to happen. So the landscape of doing it right now, why was it right now? Is it a virus? What is it? I doubt if it was from some bat. I think this is to distract us.
Well, they don't say it was from a bat. They think it was from an animal.
Jumped from
at
an
that
animal.
market. I mean, but how about what Dr. Andrew Kaufman says, that in those tests where they look for, in the PCR test and they look for the RNA,
Right.
he said that what they're finding are things called exosomes,
Right.
which look exactly like the virus. And that's what they're finding,
Well,
and
they're
they're
the same
calling
size.
that the virus.
Right. I'm familiar with that presentation, and I think it raises interesting questions, but the answer is to be provided by scientific research. I mean, we can study this more intensely and see, are these just exosomes being detected? Maybe in some cases they are, but maybe in some cases there really is a virus there. I think it needs some further study by independent scientists, not Fauci scientists.
Are there such
or
people
Bill Gates.
like independent
There really are,
scientists?
but not as many as we would like. But there are some. And so I think, that's what we want, is we want scientists who are independent with integrity and knowledge, the knowledge to check these things out.
But this whole science community, they're funded by these big guys, and if they don't play ball, they don't get
They
funded.
and they
What do
fire
you think about this guy, Michael Osterholm? That's the go-to
Well,
guy.
let me better answer what you're going on with Kaufman and so on, because I think it's an important discussion, and I don't want to brush that off really. But I looked at it, and for a while I thought, okay, maybe that is the explanation. But I see enough evidence from people working in New York City where there does seem to be contagion, spreading illness. I think there's something contagious going on in the New York City hotspot, Chicago, and so on. And we can talk about other factors that make some people more susceptible to having a problem in the hospital, or why are the nursing homes hotspots? And I think that explains why people would be having a hard time with the pandemic now, with a virus that should not be normally fatal, but in some circumstances it is. But I do think there's enough evidence from people that I trust and that I've heard from that something contagious is going on in some places. So I wouldn't say I don't subscribe to the Kaufman hypothesis that it's entirely exosomes. It's an interesting hypothesis. I don't hold that out as something that people should believe. But I think when you start explaining the deaths in certain hospitals, they get into the hospital, what happens? You get a flu shot. You maybe get a shingles shot. You know, well, the flu shot has mercury in it. And then you have
When, for this time, you mean?
any hospital, for any reason, you get brought in as a patient, they want to give you a flu shot if you haven't gotten one recently. It's like the holy
Yeah, they ask
blessed
me a million
sacrament.
times if I want one. I
Do you
don't
want
get
the
it.
flu shot? Well, there's thimerosal in it, and it's an extremely toxic mercury compound. There's some data that says people who have had the flu shot are more susceptible to having problems with this pandemic and dying from it. So it could be that CDC's promoted flu shot is part of the reason people are dying in a pandemic right
in
now.
all nursing homes, you have to have all your, there's 7 shots. You know, there's the flu, pneumonia, meningitis, shingles.
Yeah.
I forget
In the nursing, the
in
old
nursing
people.
homes
nursing
and
homes.
in most assisted livings. Okay?
Wow, that's pretty-
Number 1. Okay. Number 2, we are letting out prisoners but locking the old people in the home. Okay, we're letting prisoners out because they say it's too many people and they can get the COVID, and they're all worried about that. So they should have tested the staff way from the beginning to protect our elderly.
Because you think the staff must have brought
Must have
it
been.
into the nursing
Yeah,
home.
Right. So, you know, then they should have isolated the cases. But Leo's absolutely right. There's many, many factors. Chris Erisman is the head of the vaccine department in the state of Minnesota's health department. Her salary's paid by the CDC. But she's been very good this time by saying, every day she comes on TV when Governor Walz has his press conferences, and she says, 97, now she's been saying 89% or something like that, 97% of the deaths have been in the nursing homes or in the elderly, okay? And yes, they're heavily vaccinated. They're heavily vaccinated. So another thing is...
So why would they all die? But let me tell you a little thing that I heard from somebody. A woman said, and this is just the way I heard it, so I'm not making it. She said, when a woman menstruates, they had collections of women
Yes.
that got together,
Yes.
and what happened is over time, being in their present company,
Yes.
they all got onto the same cycle.
Yep.
Is that?
That happens.
Possibly, but you have to remember, if you're in a nursing home in today's world, and when we were young, they would put a person in a nursing home before they really needed it, because that's how society was, or they kept you at home. So now, everybody, they say the average statistic of people over 55 are on 15 drugs, okay? So you put these people in a nursing home, they have issues.
Right.
Then they have many drugs, then they get vaccinated, which their immune system is like, eh, and then they get exposed. And this is why I think this has happened. I don't know that it's a virus or not, because excuse me, many years ago on public TV, they had a program on viruses, parasites, and bacteria. And as a health professional, I was fascinated. They said years ago they didn't define bacteria and viruses. They called it all parasites. And they showed pictures of the cell on TV, and they were all some wiggly little thing. So my opinion of this is, and I have no evidence, I'm just watching this like everybody else is, no one else can tell me what it is. President Trump calls it the beast. I think it is something different that we don't know from that selection. It could be something that's mutated, something else. We just don't have a word for it yet.
Some say it's nothing different than the common flu every year. Actually, there are probably more deaths in the last 12 months than the previous 12 months. If you,
Well, in 2017, there were 63 or 65,000 regular flu deaths,
Supposedly.
or more.
Although I've never trusted their statistics on that either.
Well, and then they say, but we weren't required to test everybody. So now they're like have to test, so they're getting this COVID. And yesterday it came out in the paper, Pennsylvania got caught with their hand in the cookie jar. They had 200 of their 250 or so deaths were not really COVID deaths. And
but they just named that to scare
and so the
people.
CDC says if they have it, you have to put that on the death certificate. Because you have COVID at the same time you die, doesn't mean you died of it. It's coexisting. with whatever else is going on, heart disease, cancer,
But if you follow
strokes.
what Kaufman says, Dr. Andy Kaufman says, then they're not covered. They're exosomes. That's in everybody. Everybody has exosomes, but they don't all have the virus. So when they take a test from somebody, they have to have.
Well, I think that should be investigated further. He's raising a hypothesis. We understand it. Let's check it out. Let's have independent scientists check it out and see, how valid the test is and whether it's, in some cases, detecting something that's not from a virus.
Well, and 50% of the tests have been inaccurate. 50% false negatives and
Right.
50% false positive.
That's outrageous.
Or higher. But again, what we do know for sure is that there will be people who are tested one day, 3 days later they get tested again, and it's not positive anymore. Now it's negative. A few days later they get tested again. Now it's positive again.
Right.
So it jumps around back and forth, inconsistent, and that tells you something about the test, and that it is really a very fuzzy number that you get from the testing data. But what's very clear, I think, the evidence is super clear, is that the death count is vastly exaggerated, and it may be overstating the actual deaths by 80 to 100 times. Now, when you overcount deaths, you overcount the fraction, which is the ratio of deaths to infections, and that means the fatality statistic is way off, and that's the justification for shutting down the economy.
Right, and
So
the CDC, the first batch of tests was millions of tests. I don't know how, I can't remember the number. They were contaminated with the virus. Now, why is that? That sounds, I have more questions than answers.
That's true.
I say to myself, why would these sterile tests be contaminated? Was it purposeful?
Well, they claim it was just a screw up and you're right, but they admit that.
I know they have an answer
But
for
my
everything.
point is, when you grossly exaggerate the lethality of the virus, you are grossly exaggerating the seriousness of a pandemic that you are using to shut down the economy, deprive people of their ability to have meetings, your children to go to school, to go to church, and on, to earn a living. And that's a very serious thing. And when a government does that without justification, we have a word for that. It's called fascism.
Right.
That's fascism.
Well,
And so it's
Dr.
a very
Jensen
serious issue.
Dr. Jensen here in Minnesota is a state senator.
Scott Jensen, yes.
I know who he is, yeah.
And he said that he had the instructions
That's right.
from the CDC to list COVID as the cause of death, even when it wasn't.
So they can't deny that that's what they're doing. There are many, many doctors who are saying what Dr. Jensen is saying. There's no question about what we're just saying. They are grossly inflating the death rate, and that is not acceptable to the people of the United States, I think.
Well,
and
don't you think the people watching this show will catch on to that?
And
question it?
that's good, but the mainstream media is definitely covering it up. They want to scare us, they want to stampede us, and
They're
theory,
directed by the big pharma advertising. They get most of.
They have to keep us scared to keep us fearful.
I think
last Friday, just a second, I'm sorry. Last Friday, oh my God, there 2,000 died on Friday. 2,000 died. Well, if you Google how many in the United States usually die per day, it's 8,000. Okay, why
Yes,
aren't we
people
panicking
dying
about
all
this?
the
so they're
time.
misclassified
And they're
deaths.
usually old, you know.
They should be able to scare up a lot of deaths that they put down as COVID, because there are plenty of deaths happening that they can scrape out their COVID statistics out of. But the point is, I mean, this is a very serious discussion, because this is against democracy to put out false information from the CDC, from Fauci, and to the public through the media that does not properly challenge these official statistics. That is a serious attack on our public, and we are being plunged into a depression because of misinformation and propaganda. The very, very serious discussion that we're having here.
But isn't the governor guilty of this fascism? Because
Yes, he is.
doesn't have evidence, because we're looking for evidence that this is a COVID thing, and it's clear that they're falsifying records.
What happens at the state level is that the governors and state legislators tend to look at our own state's health department as the local experts, so it's like a check and balance against what the CDC says, but in their own minds. But the fact is that the CDC funds the state health departments, their epidemiology program.
The
their
vaccine
thinking,
department, anyway, they do.
They're heavily funded, and they're funded to promote water fluoridation, which is another scam, and on and on. So the worst things that the state health departments do that are really not good for the public health are being funded and promoted by CDC. So the corruption filters down from the federal level down to the state level, and then they have the ear of the governor, because what is the governor supposed to do? Tell the Department of Health that they're wrong about important health issues? It would take a very, very courageous, independent kind of governor to do that, and we haven't found that very much among the governors of either party. So,
Well,
but
I-
it does vary, and you have some difference from state to state, and some states are plunging ahead and opening up the economy much more than other states are.
I wonder how they could have closed it without having evidence, because if we're seeing now, there couldn't possibly have been evidence then if there's no evidence now.
Well, think about this. From the beginning, we keep hearing, well, we aren't going to open for 18 months. In the next report, 18 months. 18 months.
Michael Osterholm is the go-to guy in state epidemiology.
He used to be, anyway. Yeah.
Well, they consider him the international expert on infectious disease.
He's a vaccination.
I
He's
know.
a big pharma pawn.
But a couple of years ago, I saw him on TV, and he was saying the vaccines don't work. I thought, what happened to him? Did he have a come to Jesus moment? But now he's back on supporting the vaccines again, very much so.
Yeah, well, he's in the Gates payroll.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
He gets too much money every
Right.
week in order to go against the system. I mean, what would it look like if Michael Osterholm came out and told the truth? Because he has such credibility and such recognition worldwide that if he came out and told the truth, the whole thing would collapse. He probably wouldn't live a day. So as we
Right,
talk,
right.
they don't think the word could get out wide enough or strong enough. It's just, Leo and Leslie and
Nancy.
and Nancy kind of talking about it. So they put the lockdown on the people in order to, but they said the kids from 1 to 15 are not likely to get it, but they could bring it home to grandma who might be living with them.
Well, children have been known to be walking petri dishes.
So
that's true.
they could spread it.
Well, I think that they should be in school. There's no question they should be in school. There's many reasons for that, but not any more spreading it than they do the flu, And vaccinations, there's new literature that says you shed that virus. Say I get a vaccine. That will never happen. But say I get a
Vaccine for what?
For whatever. Flu.
For whatever.
Let's say the flu.
Okay.
Or the meningitis or the shingles. You shed this out into the air for 28 days. We used to say 10 days to 3 weeks. They're showing 28 days. You are like, I can give it to you just by walking around in Target. So that's when I'm going to wear and stay in my house, is when they
Give
start
them
vaccinating.
what you were vaccinated for.
Yes.
You can give.
Yes.
Yeah. So what
Yes.
should they do, Nancy? Quarantine the people who've just been vaccinated?
Yes. Now, this is the first time in the world we've ever quarantined healthy people. We've always quarantined the sick, like the
Right,
lepers or
right.
the polio. We quarantined the people that were sick. Now we're
Right.
quarantining the people that are healthy.
That's a good point. Right. That's pretty backwards.
And so I encourage everyone to look. You can Google this, the Kern County doctors. They have our video. They're California.
We don't need them. We're saying it. We're responsible adults.
If you need an
And we're
evidence.
as responsible
Thank
for
you.
protection of the public, for our demonstration, our work over the years. yours with what you do about mercury and dental things, and yours what you've done as a nurse and environmental issues, and I have been doing for 36 years. So we have credibility.
Thank you.
All these other people, they don't have credibility. The governor doesn't have credibility in this. He's a former teacher, a football coach, a congressman, and he gets 3 different pensions. He doesn't have the foggiest idea. He doesn't have any credibility as caring about the public, nor do any of the other people. I fought with the Minnesota Health Department over fluoridating our water. That should be an example to people, because there's reports out there that fluoridation damages the brain and lowers IQ. There's no question about it. There's a lawsuit. Paul Connett, you know
Yeah,
Paul
oh, yeah.
Connett very well. His group is carrying that lawsuit, which is
Right.
put on hold right now because of this COVID.
But it's going to be heard in June now.
So
Zoom.
Online.
it's become common to inject us with poisons and put drugs in our water. You know,
Yeah.
this has become
Or toxins.
totally, well, fluoride is it considered a drug?
Yeah,
You know,
well,
or
they
toxins.
said,
Really,
because the Dental Association says it helps children's teeth. It's
Right.
bogus.
That's a
It's
drug. It's a drug claim, but it's bogus. And
I'll tell you-
I wouldn't even dignify it by calling it a drug. I just say what they're using for the most part is hazardous industrial waste from
Right.
phosphate fertilizer plants. Those are owned by a Minnesota corporation called Mosaic, and
It was
so
Cargill, and they sold
used
that
to, used to
division.
be a spin-off of Cargill, and they get vast amounts of money from selling their pollution, their hazardous waste, so that we have the great privilege of drinking it in our drinking water.
Right.
And then they claim, as part of the scam, that it's good for little children's teeth. So if you're against
So I
it,
say, well, then fluoridate the little children. Take them
Right.
in and do whatever you want with them. Why would I have to drink?
Right.
that's right.
That's
Well,
right. I have to
but
buy a
it's not-
$4,000 filter because you're putting this junk in my water.
But
for
That
it's
some
should
not-
be a tip-off to people watching the show.
not good for anybody, including the little children. It's a scam. And so I think people, again, this is a very clear case that we can make what we're talking about, and the media won't tell you, and the CDC is the biggest promoter of water fluoridation, and they get every state health department to jump on board.
Getting back to COVID, one of my things is, so they keep saying, well, look at the 1918 flu. Oh my God, pandemic. And how many times did you hear pandemic before this, you know, as
Yeah.
a word? Anyway, the 1918 flu, they say, oh, the soldiers brought it back from Europe. Well, there was a Rockefeller experimental vaccine, bacterial vaccine, that they gave to the Fort Riley, Kansas soldiers. Then they sent them overseas. They infected all of Europe. Then they came back and infected the people here. So this was no accidental thing. It was a Rockefeller experimental vaccine. So when they start comparing this to that, to the 1918 flu, another thing about that, they would give them aspirin. The ones that died the 1980 flu, 18 flu, they gave them aspirin to take their temperature down. Well, in my world, we like a temperature because it burns off the disease. So the ones that and so then they gave them so much aspirin that their lungs bled. So when you see the new statistics, oh, young people, they're coming in with strokes. What does the American average person we're not average, but the regular people do when they start to get sick? They take Tylenol or Advil. I don't know the names of the other ones because
Motrin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Motrin. And you look it up, one of the top side effects is a stroke, heart
Or bleeding.
attack.
From Tylenol.
From Tylenol, not bleeding, no, from Tylenol.
Tylenol.
So it's like, we all think that's something benign. I mean, many years ago, they came out and said Tylenol rotted your liver, but suddenly that's all erased, you know. So when they compare this, we're going to have more people die now than we did in 1918. Well, there's more people, for one thing, you know, and
People are living
Well, also,
and they're living longer, right?
considerably longer.
People were given, some people were given homeopathy.
Oh, right,
with
the homeopathy
great
patients are the
success.
ones that lived, yes.
Great success.
Yes.
So that, you know, but of course that doesn't make the drug companies happy.
No, they're cheap.
That story.
Homeopathy is cheap.
And homeopathy is today still something that the public health establishment would rather die than mention to the public. And they don't mention vitamin C, and they don't mention other vitamins.
Only disparagingly.
They don't mention melatonin, which is very, very good for the immune system, and which is high in the children, but it drops off, the levels of melatonin drop off as you get older until you get into the elderly age group, and they're very, very deficient in melatonin, and it's an inexpensive supplement that people could be taking, say, before bedtime, and it helps them sleep better, and it helps their immune function
What is it
tremendously.
Melatonin.
Melatonin is a
There's
natural.
something called
Yeah.
It's a
melatonin?
naturally produced hormone produced in the pineal gland, but also in other parts of the body, we now realize, and it can be taken at levels higher than they usually talk about, like, they'll say take 1 or 2 milligrams, but you can take much, much more to your benefit, and it makes up for the fact that, hey, as you are getting older, you are making less melatonin.
Well, you get it in your foods too, like turkey, chicken.
Oh, no.
Has
Yes, you-
melatonin.
yes, you
Well,
do.
no, I think
Yes,
you have
you
to
do.
make it. You're thinking of tryptophan.
No, I'm thinking of melatonin, that
Melatonin.
there are foods that you have
maybe
to
have
feed your
precur-
body to make
Oh, there
it.
are precursors.
Right.
Okay, precursors of it.
Right.
But you have to make it, and
that strengthens
it
your immune system.
is
Right.
good for your immune system. It helps you fight off things like cancer, which is a huge issue in our society. So if we had an honest public health establishment, they would be telling the public about this. But no drug company is going to make a killing off of melatonin because it's natural.
And they
They
also-
can't patent it.
They
How
all-
about magnesium?
Oh,
Magnesium is very
definitely.
good, and people are very deficient
All
in
your
that.
antioxidants.
Zinc
Zinc
is
is-
important in immunity, and so they will never get out there except maybe Trump.
And the
will mention
number
it,
one
but
thing, if they keep saying on the news,
is
even I think even Bix and Fauci say you got to have a
Birx,
strong
Birx.
immune system.
Burks.
Burke, sorry. Anyway,
Right.
so
The world's worst dresser. I've never seen a person wrap more meaningless clothing. I was in the clothing business for many years.
Oh, okay.
And
Well,
see,
you're the expert on that then.
yes, I am.
anyway,
All right.
I am.
Okay.
The
no
world's
one ever
worst
mentions,
dresser.
because the medical community does not ever speak of this, but the basis of your immune system is the health of the gut. And so our world is constantly antibiotics. It cleans out the gut. The chlorine in our water cleans out the gut. It sterilizes the gut. So we need...
So it's has a negative impact. you're
Yes,
saying.
and so we need fermented vegetables, we need yogurt, we need all the cultures in the world that had longevity. They had a fermented something like fermented goat cheese, fermented goat's milk,
Kefir.
yogurt, kefir.
Kefir, yeah.
But not from the chemicalized versions you have in the store that are full of antibiotics and hormones.
Those dairy products.
Yes,
you're
those dairy
talking
products.
about.
So you need
So-
good natural stuff to plant the gut. Most people's guts in the United States of America are completely bad. In about 85, I went to Alaska and I had to write a paper on the immune system, or I chose to. So I went to the medical school. And I couldn't find anything on the immune system other than the spleen, and we know we have lymph nodes under the arms and the groin. They had nothing. This is in the mid-'80s. About it's a vessel system like your heart and your blood vessels. Right along every blood vessel is a lymph vessel. And so I'm thinking,
Right.
they didn't even know that? So now when they talk about the immune system, they're more knowledgeable about it, but that's just so recent when you think of life and overall what is science and what we're supposed to believe in and what we're supposed to buy. The governor, when we were rallying a week ago on Friday, he was at a press conference in his house. And he said, I don't know why those people are protesting out there, back to the governor. He said, and I don't have time to find out. Now, this man must have a huge overstuffed staff. He's got a lieutenant governor with a staff. He has the Speaker of the House and the majority leader in the House and the minority leader in the Senate and the whole Democratic Party. He couldn't find somebody to ask why we were out there. That's how
Well, that was
delusional he is. He still doesn't get that what we want is to open up our economy. Who's going to pay for all this?
I wanted to put a citizen's arrest on the governor, and there is a statute that defines how to, if you observe, so I contacted an attorney, and the attorney said, well, your problem would be is you have to personally observe him committing the crime.
Oh, okay.
And so I can't do that. I mean, can't get access to see him making the statement. I saw it on television, but you have to personally observe it. But I thought that because I ran into a couple of guys at the rally, I was at that anti-lockdown protest with machine guns. And I like that, you know.
They had machine guns?
At the automatic weapons at the rally. A couple of two guys, and I saw a lot of guys with sidearms. And of course, they probably have permits to carry that, but you don't need a permit to carry an AR-15.
Really?
There's no regulation for that. So the reason I got into that is I was going to try to recruit a bunch of them to accompany me, to protect me, as I went down to make that citizen's arrest on the governor, but the attorney felt that I wouldn't be successful in doing that because I didn't meet that first challenge of observing him committing his crime. What he did is he's committed a crime. He is a war criminal, and he's committing atrocities on the people, and they just don't get it.
Well, it's against our Constitution to lock us down this way.
80% of the public out there supports the lockdown. They think this is they believe it. But after this whole thing, this will be exposed. Will come out. What we're talking about, the phony deaths, the testing, the faking, and all of that kind of stuff. Who said what? When it's going to all come out at some point, and they'll have to be charged with these crimes against humanity, crimes against the people.
Well, I want the governor to meet with us who have this information. I know he won't, but that's what he wants to know, what we want. I'm appalled that he drinks the Kool-Aid and then spews what it's like a cult.
I was in a gubernatorial, when I was running for governor, I was in a gubernatorial debate with him, and you know what, I know he's a military guy, was a teacher and all of this, but he's basically a fool. You know, he's not articulate, and he's also a socialist, and it's pretty hard to get any place with a socialist, because socialists don't do anything. They don't produce anything. They don't create a job. They don't create money.
Oh, that's why he does it. Okay.
That's what socialists do
know,
and
I know.
are. And most of the DFL they're a bunch of socialists, even though some of them are wealthy and have a lot of money.
They probably don't agree with that description. Just in case you didn't know. But anyway.
Well, it's become more and more this way. I grew up in South Dakota. It was against the law to be anything but a Republican. And so then I come...
In South Dakota?
Yeah, I grew up in South Dakota.
really.
Well, how are they doing with it? Did they lock down?
No, Kristi Noem, the governor, did not lock down. She refuses to lock down. North Dakota, South Dakota, now Iowa claims they didn't shut down, but my friends down there say that, you know, they've locked down all the amusement parks and they've...
Well, they can't hide that.
They've locked down a whole bunch of stuff in the resort areas, so I don't know why she can say they're not locked down, but...
I'm waiting to unload on the Park and Recreation Board in Minneapolis. What a pathetic bunch they are. They've taken down the hoops at the parks.
Did you see the picture in the newspaper this week? Showed all the runners around the lake. They're like close together. But they closed down the hoops and the slides and the jungle gyms.
In the park. Well, we're going to go after them. I mean, we have to everybody that's currently in office that hasn't come out in opposition to this needs to be removed from office. So there's going to be some significant changes if we survive this. This is pretty horrible. I don't know what the suicide rate is, but
it's getting high.
Depression has got to be...
Wife abuse, child abuse,
I
and
took
suicide.
the bus back from shopping earlier today, and there was a lady who got on the bus, and she wanted to smoke in the bus shelter, which she's cooped up in this little apartment, and so I didn't object to her. I mean, she's just so pathetic, cooped up in her apartment, just wants to come out for a smoke, so she had to take the bus down to the Cub food store and go in the bus shelter. So sad to see what's happening, and they're putting up with it. They're taking our liberty, and they're using the kids as little pawns. I don't know, I'd like to mobilize the kids to take it over. Where are we going to get the support to do this?
Well, I have friends who say, when you talk about the economy, Nancy, you should be just talking about health. She said, I would rather live in my car. Because I said, people are they're losing their homes. They can't pay their rent. And she said, I'd rather live in my car than be dead from COVID. So I love my friend very, very much, in case she's watching. But this does not compute as we know, this information has not coming from proper sources. The governor has drunk the Kool-Aid, and he does not want to listen to anything else. I welcome him. If someone tells him that we said this, I welcome him to talk to us at any time and to educate him.
He's not going to, because he'll be shown to be the fool that he is. Let's talk about this other issue of how they all get on the same page. The CDC and the WHO and the National Institute for Health, they're all saying the same thing. Don't you think there's anybody in there that sees it the way we do? I think there are, but they know that if they come out and say something, they'll be terminated.
Correct. Terminated in more ways than one, perhaps.
Terminated in more ways than one.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, I mean,
Robert Kennedy has come out as a real champion in this vaccination issue. And he's gone after people like Sanjay Gupta, who would go on CNN. He's supposed to be some go-to medical guy with Anderson Cooper. Tell you what a dickhead he is, pardon my French. And he's with Sanjay Gupta lying to the public about vaccines and vaccination. So Robert Kennedy did a big piece about Sanjay, trying to be respectful, you know, with all the, and said, you used to be a decent human being, Sanjay, but maybe he's got so many bills that he can't be a decent human being anymore.
well, Kennedy,
Robert Kennedy
Robert
Jr.
D. Kennedy Jr., he started out by finding the problems with the mercury in the oceans and in our fish. That's how he started out.
and rivers.
And in rivers and oceans or wherever. So that's how
He
he,
was with that river group in
River keepers.
yeah.
River
So
Keepers.
it expanded to other places, and then the vaccine, he started seeing it in the vaccines, and that's how he got into the vaccine, because it's straight from mercury.
Well,
Mercury
his
is just-
group is the Children's Health Defense, is
right.
what he has. And
But
I think he's very credible when I...
He's expanded his view and
To vaccines.
And so yeah, I respect him a lot, and so you know I think it's an example of where you know you just can't classify people according to their political party background or anything. People can grow and learn, and I do believe there are a lot of very fine people in our country. In fact, I think the majority of people in our country are very fine, decent people, and but they are often misdirected, miseducated by our media, and so of course they get off on the wrong track on issues.
Unrefined.
And that's why our work as educators and writers and so on is so important. And I respect that. I think we, you know, a lot of people at this point in our history want to shut down the conversation and not allow criticism of the government because we are under this pandemic threat. But it is not time to shut down conversations. We have to continue to challenge each other. We have to continue to ask for independent scientists and to hear what they have to say. And there are some very fine doctors out there, and they have interesting things to say. So,
Well, how it gets this way, in my opinion, is there's more, Robert Kennedy said that there's more big pharma lobbyists in Washington than there are legislators. Okay?
Congress
and,
members,
and when Leo and I lobbied you've been lobbying at the Capitol for fluoride or whatever.
Who has?
Have you?
He has, yeah.
As a citizen activist.
We had a bill, Senator Champion,
Right.
Bobby Joe Champion, he had a bill to rescind Minnesota
Water
Statute
freeze.
144.1 that mandates the fluoride. Couldn't even get any...
And you know why?
Couldn't get a
because
hearing.
several of the legislators that I was involved with, women, they said that these lobbyists come in with grocery bags of cash and they push it under their desk like this. And the ones that I spoke to, one of them, Mary Ellen
legislator?
Yeah, to the legislator. And one of the legislators, she was so connected to God that she did her rosary beads with a prayer shawl on her at hearings because it was so bad.
While they pushed the money on her desk?
And in her office, they would come in and push it under your desk. And so why do they do this? Our people in government are paid off, many of them. They're good legislators, but if they were in the majority, we would not be doing this. We wouldn't have a problem with this if they were most of them. So lobbyists from Big Pharma, from garbage burning to fluoride, wow.
Well, I contacted Republican Representative John Heinrich, a former U.S. Marine, military police, 7-8 years, first-term legislator. I've been talking with him about other issues regarding money. I have a money plan that I've been working on. But I asked him to do something there must be some legislative powers to overturn what the governor is doing. And he hasn't answered my emails. I've sent out numerous emails, and you get them, Leo, so you know some of them are pretty strong, and I'm making allegations. I said, this is a fraud. This is that people are not responding to me because they think I'm nuts.
Well, not only that, he's a first-termer, and they sent him to caucus. They sent him in the first-term class on how to behave. So he's a first-termer, and
so that's what his problem
possibly,
is?
I don't know the guy, but you know,
well,
it's
he's buddies
serious.
with this guy, Bob Vogel, who he wanted to arrange for me to talk about the money plan and all. Well, Vogel is a 70-year-old guy. He's not going to run again, so Vogel could come out and do something or say something about it. But they're mute, they're silent. I said, are you guys going to sit still while we suffer? And they don't even answer.
Well, they were going to introduce a bill again today to take away Governor Walz's powers. And they introduced it last week, and they didn't get many votes. And
who introduced it?
I don't remember who introduced, but they only got like 9 votes.
The Republicans?
Jensen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Was it Munson? Munson, I think, in the House.
And so there were only 9 last week, and I don't know how many are this week, because today they introduced it again.
Well, Melissa Hortman should be exposed for what she is. She's part of the socialist movement. Her and Frank Hornstein and the other turd balls in Minneapolis, what a despicable bunch of people they are. They're to blame for this because they're sitting silent while we're suffering.
Well, while our rights are removed from us. How I met Leo was because they charged a naturopath in town for practicing medicine without a license. And so Leo and I and a couple other people, we worked to pass a bill to make natural health legal without licensure.
Oh, your naturopath promoters, they don't like that at all.
No, and we were up against the biggest power and money in the world. But so, you know, it's very difficult. It's an uphill push to keep our freedoms. And so we lobbied on this is America. We have the right to do this. And so that's why when you talk about freedom, and I'm the daughter of a Marine fighter pilot. You know, he attacked Tokyo in 1945, and not all of his crew came back. So he would be appalled at how we are shut down like this.
This is kind of a false flag type thing, right? Wouldn't you say that what they're doing is a false flag and the purpose of it is to...
something along those lines.
Well, they want to do the 5G electrification network. I saw a report this morning that they've just spotted the satellites put up by Elon Musk, the Tesla car guy. He's putting up satellites to, and they've just noticed a bunch of them before they're together, you know, when they put them, that they have to go up to higher altitudes and then separate, and they won't be able to spot them. But there's a lot of that 5G going on, and people don't get it.
Well, in today's paper, they admitted that we know there was 68% staying home a few weeks ago. Then a couple weeks, then it was 38%, and Saturday and Sunday was 28% staying home. How do we know? It said in the paper, because we track everybody with their cell phones. So this is all about tracking. It's about control. It's about people controlling us.
Yeah, 5G is being forced upon every neighborhood in every town and city in America. Being forced upon us. It will serve as a surveillance system as well as a communication system. It will be the most powerful source of radiation that we've ever been exposed to for most of us. You know, most of us don't live down the block from a big cell tower.
Well, so you're gonna, because they have to put them all close
to
together.
And this won't be a big cell tower, but it will be a less noticeable thing on telephone poles or lamp poles, and but maybe 28 feet off the ground and about at the right height to shine directly into the second story window of a house where somebody's sleeping at night, and they're not going to sleep very well when the 5G is coming at them. So I think the worst mistake is to become a user of it and get a smartphone that will use it, because that just encourages them to do this. But it will be a surveillance system, and it will have military type applications, because the phased array of little antennas together, that array of antennas can act like one coordinated antenna that sends a beam in a certain direction that's very powerful, and supposedly it'll hit that person's smartphone. But what if it hits your eye or your other sensitive body parts, or your brain? Those are powerful beams, and they could be used by a rogue government. Not that we would ever have a rogue government, but by a rogue government to attack activists, people that they want to get rid of, and in a bloodless fashion, using that technology with beams as a weapon. And it can be modulated, which means you put other information on it, other frequencies, to increase the biological damage that's being done. And so modulation is part of the picture, and I think it does have military applications, and could be used to produce a great deal of harm to individuals that they don't like for one reason or another.
It suppresses your immune system, and Wuhan had, before this, bragged that they are the first city in the world that was completely wired for 5G. Now, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And then New York, you know that that's pretty wired probably. And now what, these Navy ships, there's all these guys, poor guys, have COVID. Those Navy ships, I'm sure, are wired for it.
Especially the big aircraft carriers.
Yeah,
Well,
and just a second.
Yeah.
So
I think we're going to run out of time here. We're okay?
And so
couple of minutes.
those cruise ships, the Princess cruise ships, had bragged that they're the first cruise ships that were wired for 5G.
And that wasn't a big deal. Not that many people got it and
Right.
died and
Right.
all of that kind of stuff.
Well-
and a lot of times the people on a cruise ship died from fear and other.
Yep.
Let me jump in on this, and because I have a very huge interest in this. But like Nancy was saying, Wuhan, at the end of 2019, there were 10,000 5G small cell antennas installed in Wuhan, and so as to be a showcase city for 5G. And my hypothesis, and this is something I can't prove, but I have a hypothesis about it, is that the Chinese government, being not, say, the most ethical organization in history, decided it was a great time to secretly test 5G on unsuspecting civilians. So, you prepare for the test, you control it, you measure it, how many people get sick, how many people die, and it's all very scientific, but it has to be a secret because it's extremely unethical to test 5G, and I think especially at 60 gigahertz, which
60.
is 60 gigahertz. Giga means 10 to the 9th, and that is a frequency that's very well absorbed by the oxygen molecule, O2. It has a resonance frequency there, and it will absorb it. But when O2 has absorbed that photon at that frequency, it is not properly taken up by the hemoglobin molecule in our red blood cells, and we can suffer oxygen deprivation, and that's a pretty bad thing to have happening to a human being.
One of the doctors reported that
Oxygen,
altitude.
it was like altitude sickness, it was oxygen deprivation, and so if you want to extend the hypothesis that they started testing out the same thing, 60 gigahertz secretly, maybe in New York City, maybe in Kirkland, Washington, where you had that early spike in deaths. The first big spike in the United States was in Kirkland, Washington. You may have them testing it out on people in Chicago area, and my goodness, do you suppose they would even be evil enough to test it out on the minority population more than the white? They wouldn't be racists, would they? So, you know, there are some certain things that I think we should be checking on in Chicago and in New York. Who's getting exposed to 5G, and are we getting exposed at this 60 gigahertz frequency that will be absorbed by oxygen? And, you know, if that is going on, that would be another crime against humanity and a huge scandal. We also know that in northern Italy, that area has had 5G installed also, and they've also been exposed to an experimental vaccine that is believed to be a more dangerous vaccine. So
For
the
what?
spike, the people in that region.
What was the vaccine they were exposed to?
I have my notes on it, but I don't know if I have them right this second. But you know, I can give you the quotation on
terribly
that.
polluted.
Very polluted.
area.
They have a very
So-
high rate of pneumonia because it's so polluted. It's in a valley with huge industry.
The Po Valley, and that northern Italy area is known throughout Europe to be a place that's vulnerable to a high death rate from an infection like the ordinary flu. So this could be more of the same thing, but they wanted to scare the entire world by a huge death rate in northern Italy, and they did. Largely they succeeded in scaring most of Europe and most of the world, and then, you know, it came on to America, and we do have hot spots. Well, if we have hot spots, we have real deaths, and we have had real deaths. They should be investigated by independent scientists who will not overlook any of these clues and will investigate the possible.
Well, I think
link.
we're going to have to do that. We're going to have nobody's going to do it. We're going to have to do it. These people that are watching this show, they need to help.
Well, what I'm saying is there should be animal tests of the 5G at 60 gigahertz. What does it do to an animal that is like a rat, that's directly exposed to it, as well as breathing that oxygen?
They've done those tests.
And what about a rat who is not directly hit by it,
I
but
don't
is breathing
support
that
animal
oxygen?
testing. I have
Okay.
to disagree with you on that.
I think you
I
could.
appreciate
I
that.
like the kind of studies that actually, you know, double-blind studies are experiments on a human, and
We
double-blind
know the
studies.
5G is harmful. That's
I
why
know,
they
that's
don't
what I mean.
allow
So we-
discussion about
Right,
it.
We
so
do.
we research people.
We do know it. You're
So
right.
We've already got the evidence.
We know enough to
Right.
not do it.
I have peer-reviewed studies that I've sent to a big-time lawyer, and he doesn't want to respond back.
Well, what I mean is,
Okay.
observational of the society and what's going on is, to me, much more valid than going against the Geneva Convention and having double-blind studies and experimenting on humans or rats. So I agree with you that we can look and see what's happening. Kid has basement, has bedroom in basement, right by the smart meter. Oh my God, now he's got headaches, now he's got brain cancer. I think that we should look at what's going on. A double-blind study usually is slanted toward what the answer they want to get anyway. It's not real science.
The smart meter is giving off the radio waves.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Smart meters
oh.
give off. It's probably around 2.4 gigahertz. There are different frequencies used depending on which way it's transmitting, but it's a powerful source of radio frequency radiation. It's modulated, and sometimes it is just outside somebody's bedroom wall
I got
or
it right
kitchen.
in my basement. Our landlord wouldn't let me get rid of it.
And I get a lot of calls from people who want to know how to shield from it and how to protect from it, and I can help people with that. And Safe Technology Minnesota, Safe Tech MN is our website, and you know, we help people, we answer questions. But
Let me
we're
make
against-
sure that I get this to everybody, that to reach Leo Cashman and Nancy Hone, you need to just email me, you know, or the Earth Protector website, or if they're watching
Right.
this show, and I'll filter the information off to you. Anybody needs help with their smart meters or their diet or things like that, this is the place you want to come to call. There are more people besides Nancy. There's Dr. Luckman with Present Moment Herbs and Goods. Lots of people.
Lots of people. Go to your health food store. Get used to eating organic. Make your body healthy.
But
Plant
we
the
need
flora
to
and
show
fauna
them
in your
how to
gut.
do that,
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
Start
People-
looking in better sources for your information.
People are not well educated about the EMF issue for sure, and so
Well,
that's why we do the educational work.
Electromagnetic
And-
frequency
yeah.
is what EMF
Right,
is.
right.
But part of
But
the
we're the ones that are going to have to get the scientists that you're talking about to do
I
that.
understand
you know?
that. I understand that.
I'll have to
But part of-
process that.
Right.
Part of the landscape I was talking about is people are unhealthy. So they're already unhealthy, and people say, oh, they're healthy. They're not really healthy. They've done autopsies on children under 10 that were in car accidents, and their arteries are clogged.
They're loaded with high fructose corn
Yep,
syrup
and-
and snacks and junk food.
yeah.
In my neighborhood, there's a store. It's the most toxic corner store you can imagine. So tobacco and chips and high fructose corn syrup. So it's all loaded with
Right.
poison.
So
And-
our people as a society are not healthy. That's part of the landscape I was talking about.
Yeah, but I don't
Perfect
need to be
timing.
locked up because they're not healthy
That's
and their
right.
grandma's dying.
That's right.
That's grandma's problem, not mine.
That's right. I'm with you.
But they're suffering, and now we're going to have to go after those people, the park and recreation, with the audacity of them to take down the hoops in the playground. Or what
Well, the politicians who have gotten this all together,
Well, I wanna
there's
fi-
an election coming up, and
I
remember
want to
who.
find out on what evidence the mayor of Minneapolis allowed the city to be shut down. His city, he's the mayor. He's supposed to protect the people. So we got the mayor and 13 council people and a Hennepin County Board of Commissioners allowed us to be, so we're going to go to the governor. We could beat up on the governor pretty good, but I'd like to go local over here with the council people. St. Paul, I think you got
we're locked down.
seven
Carter.
imbeciles, right?
Right. Right. And they don't want to listen to the people except Jane Prince if she's listening.
Unless you bring them a bunch of cash and
I guess
bring it
so.
in
But
there.
it's
Well, we're on
Difficult.
the TV. We're going to have more TV in the future. I'm figuring out how to beam it up or get it out more. So the Earth Protector television show has become a significant force. I mean, who wants to watch Amelia Santinello on WCC? What a joke, huh? That whole bunch.
know.
Yeah, liars and misleaders. So we're lucky to have Leo Cashman, a patriot, health advocate, Nancy Hone. Thank you so much
Thank you
for
for
being
having
here.
us. Thank you.
Registered nurse, naturopath,
homeopath, too.
Homeopath.
homeopath, and daughter of a United States Marine pilot. Yeah,
A
that's pretty
fighter
cool.
pilot, right.
I got a lot of Marines around me, but Heinrich is a Marine and he disappointed me. But Gregory Soderbergh is a Marine out of Austin, Minnesota, and he's not going to stand for forced vaccination, and he'll help do whatever needs to be
Good.
done. So
All right.
we need to get together. Thank you, Leo.
Okay.
Very
Thank you.
much.
All right.
Nancy, thank
Very
you
good.
so much for doing it
Thank you.
and being with me. Leslie
Okay.
Davis for the Earth Protectors, thanks a lot for watching.